marketing or just overall project management or team management. So he's riffing on that, and he's at IMS Health. And then after that, I think we have an outside the box kind of person, Evelyn Swenson, who's she's 85 and she's just written a book, and she was the head of the Opera Delaware and a bunch of cultural institutions. She got 2 degrees from Westchester when she was 40, and she's just like this amazing artist, reinventing herself every decade, and occasionally I like to throw in somebody like that who's inspirational. And then after that, I think we have somewhere out there, I'll just say one more, B Corp is coming in. B Corp is an organization that is quasi-governmental in that they will come in and inspect your business to make sure that you are awesome, that you treat your employees right, that you're kind to the environment. Patagonia is a B Corp. Dansko is a B Corp, the first B Corp actually, and through magic networking, we got the president or the founder of Dansko to co-present with them. So that's in July. So enough with the start of Meetup. Night Owls is every Wednesday from 7 to 10. Brandon came up with that idea, and it's just an open time to hang out and code, chat, talk about your projects, drink beer. Sometimes we don't do it. It doesn't seem like anybody works, but a lot of interesting things have come out of that. So that's free, it's open to the public. The third thing we do is we run a pre-early stage incubator, and that means that we look for idea people with nascent products or concepts, and we work to bring that to market as fast as possible, maybe even sidestepping the whole concept of the company, commercialize innovation quickly. So we're excited to tell Juliane all about that after. So, have I missed anything, Kevin?
This is pretty good.
Okay.
I don't know if I can remember.
So I've been doing the same thing for 25 weeks. So thank you, Juliana, for giving us a story way back in November when it was just an idea. As a hey, we're co-working space, and I threw the sign on, and then I think I emailed you 10 minutes later.
Oh, is that what happened?
No, it was a couple weeks after. And then through that connection, you also did a story at EO, which is a company, a startup I'm working on. But it occurred to me that through a space like this, where we can create relationships, then when other interesting stories come up, there's a better chance that maybe we'll get covered. And so a friend of the lab, Jared Bello, started Rapid FM, got into 500 startups. He came, some of you were here for Night Owls. He demoed the product, it was really fun. He did a story on that. So thanks for listening to us way out here in Westchester. And so she's going to intro herself and give a little update, and then we'll have a good Q&A because we have a nice crowd here. So thank you for coming.
So thank you so much, Chris and Ben, for putting this together. I was just saying earlier, it's the first time I've been in Westchester. I didn't quite know so far, so sorry I was a little bit late. It's a really cute town, though, so I'm excited to explore a little bit more. So I guess I thought I would introduce myself a little bit and talk about my time at Technically Philly and sort of like a little bit about what I've learned over the past 2 years working in the tech scene, and then we'll do a Q&A. I guess to start, I wanted to explain how I sort of fell into the job. So people always ask me, oh, are you a tech person? And I'm not at all. I made web pages on XPage when I was like 8 or something, but that's like the extent of my tech expertise. So I was working at the Daily News and I was writing about city government, city services, and Technically Philly approached me when they heard that I was looking for a job, and they had like a reporter opening, and I didn't know anything about the Philly tech scene. I didn't actually even really know it existed. So
I was kind of just thrown into it, and I didn't know anything about, like, it seemed like people were talking a different language to me. They would talk about like Ruby and like Java and like Objective-C, and I was just like, okay, yeah, and I would just be writing. But thankfully there's been like a big learning curve. So I guess a little bit about what we do is we cover the Philly tech scene very, very closely. The Philly and the greater Philly tech scene really closely. So it's not just like, say like the Inquirer business section when they'll do a story about a company only when that company is like going public or when like something really big has happened. We'll cover it from the beginning and then every single like piece of news after that. So a really good example is what Chris was talking about is when Walnut Street Labs opened up, I wrote a story about it, and then I wanted to know, like, well, I told them, I was like, keep me posted, and I wanted to know every little thing that happened after that. So if they got a grant or a new company that was here, any events that were happening, I just, like, that kind of thing, like, that's what we cover. And it's that sort of, like, community-based reporting, which we really try, like, which we pride ourselves on. So we follow like when developers move from like one company to another, and or when like a city employee moves from like one tech department to like a different tech part. And it's funny because these people like aren't used to getting covered so much. So like when I say, oh, like, can I write about how you're gonna move to like another startup? They're like, really? Like, do you care about that? And I'm like, yeah, because everyone is like part of this community. And like all those little movements are important. And so, okay, so now I'm gonna go into these sort of like 3 little lessons that I put together that I learned, and about like, I guess sort of what my job is about, like what I've learned that it's about. And I guess the first one is that it's really all about the people. And so when I tell people I'm a tech reporter, they're like, oh, so do you do like gadget reviews? Or like, do you write about the new phones that are out? And honestly, like, I don't care about that at all. Like, what I really care about with my job is talking to people like Chris, or like meeting people that work at startups and meeting people that work in government or teach STEM. So it's really just like all about the people and the people behind these businesses. It's cool to me. I mean, it's cool and it's impressive if you're making a lot of money or you're raising venture funding. But what I find really interesting about it, and when I think sort of how we try to set our coverage apart is like that human factor. So it's not just like look at what these smart people are doing, like in terms of money, but it's also like about personality and like that human side of things. And I guess the other side of that is that we're so in the community, like, you know, I see people at events and we talk all the time, and sometimes, and I have like a good relationship with people, so sometimes it makes it hard to ask like the harder questions. So if I hear about like a startup laying off a bunch of their developers, it can be really difficult for me to like ask the CEO like what's going on here, because you know it's sort of like, why are you trying to write this like negative story, and like why are you trying to like poke your nose where like I know we're just trying to work things out. And so that's been one of my struggles over the past 2 years, sort of like finding a good balance between like, you know, how do you tell these sort of tougher stories that are really important to how the Philadelphia tech scene is growing, but also like keep this level of camaraderie and like, yeah, like you're allies with these people because we are. And then I guess another big lesson that I've learned from this job is that it's about not being afraid to look stupid. And so I was kind of getting that earlier when I said I didn't know much about tech. I think a really good example of this is a story that I wrote about SEPTA and the work that they did to make it so their website and their app wouldn't crash when it like snowed. And so they were having like serious problems with every time it snowed this past winter, their website would go down, and because everyone would be going on SEPTA.org to see like the schedules to see what was late, and it would always crash. And so I was just talking to one of the guys who works in their tech department, and he was like, yeah, and we like had to put in this failover and this and that, and like put in this server and like this cloud, and I was like, okay, I think there's a good story here. I don't understand anything that you said, but like, can you just walk me through it? And so we talked for like 2 hours, and he like drew me a diagram of like what it looks like when people are like pinging a site, and then how it worked to like get all these like a cloud server and like get this failover and a load balancer. And that was one of the most fun stories I did, because he just explained all this stuff to me and I learned it, and it was actually like I could explain it in a way that was like useful to other people, to be like, this is something that city government is doing, or city-state government is doing to make services better using technology. And it took a certain amount of like lowering my pride, where I could be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you explain it to me like little by little? And so that's been like, yeah, it's been a really good learning experience for me to sort of be able to accept like that I might not know a lot, but that I can get it, and people will explain it to me like if you just ask, or people will explain to you, to anyone, if you just ask. I think people are really generous with their knowledge.
That kind of posits the space that you filled that wasn't there before, like somebody to translate what's going on in this complicated world of tech startups and to explain it to the greater world. And that's a real valuable service to the economy in the area. So really, before Technically Philly, I know that the one guy who uses the, I don't know if he calls himself Ben Franklin or Ben, what's his name? There's a blogger out there who does a little bit of that. Tom Payne.
Oh, Tom Payne,
Is
yeah.
it his real name?
Philly Tech News. Yeah, I think it is his real name. Yeah.
So he does it a little, but I think that translation into normal kind of vernacular is critical. So
Cool. Thanks.
That's the flip side.
Yeah. And then I guess the last thing I've been thinking about a lot is how it's not. And so this is like, I don't know how to say this. So it's how it's like not about the glory, like my job. And it's hard to say that when like a bunch of you guys are here to see me speak. And when like I'm at a Philly Tech Week event and people are coming up to me and they say that they recognize my photo, and so I always feel really special. But I guess maybe when I started out in journalism, there was a certain ideal that I thought a good journalist had to be. And so I guess I thought, and I think a lot of young journalists have this idea that you want to be like that Woodward and Bernstein, and you want to be like muckraking, and you want to be holding people accountable, which I think we do, but we also do a lot of other stuff. And I guess I sort of looked to that, and I thought that I needed to write these sort of like controversial stories in order to like have an impact. And I guess I've realized, especially in the last year, that doing little stories, so every week I do a startup roundup, and I write super short bits of news about anything in the tech scene. So it's like, this developer went to another company, or Walnut Tree Labs raised like $100,000, something like just like a grant. So things like that, and those little bits of news that other journalists like wouldn't write about because it wasn't newsworthy to them. Like I get so many emails saying that like the startup roundup is like really important to them, and that it keeps them up with what's going on. And so I guess I've really sort of changed the way that I look at like what a good journalist is. It's not just someone who can like, take down the president. It can be someone who covers like the smallest movements of a community, and if that matters to people, and it seems like it does, then it can be like just as powerful and impactful. So
it's curation, right? Especially with Twitter and blogging in general. I mean, look at where TechCrunch started and why TechCrunch was successful, because they essentially did exactly what you're saying. They covered all of these little stories that eventually enabled them to build relationships that enabled them to cover really big stories. And
Yeah.
not to interrupt.
No, please. Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I've come to be really proud of being in this position. There's a little thing that happened 2 weeks ago. Was I was at a music festival and I saw a friend of mine from the tech scene, and he introduced me to another friend of his. And he was like, "Oh, do you work at Technically?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "You're our reporter?" And I don't know why, but it just, like, him saying "you're our reporter" really, like, struck something in me where I was like, yes, I am your reporter. Like, that is my job. That's like what I do. And it really sort of put into perspective, like the work I do and like what it means to other people. Because I think it's easy to forget that. So yeah, I'd be happy to take questions now.
Well, I think this is a good segue. Raise your hand if you're part of a startup.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Hands.
So you obviously have to come back because you can't talk to all of these people one-to-one. But yeah, I think it's a service to the economy, and because software is going to eat the world, as we know, and we're hungry people out here, and there's hungry people changing things up in Philly, and every city needs a tech crunch, and you guys are filling a big void, and buzz is critical. I mean, maybe I could put you on the spot, Joanne, from About One, because we've been talking with Kevin. Kevin met Joanne, CEO of About One,
Yeah.
at an event, and we discussed like the lack of coverage. You guys are doing a ton, but there's a lot of stuff out here, and we've heard from angels that it's hard to get money where the stories aren't happening. But the stories are happening; they're just not being covered. So, do you want to comment on like what the value of buzz and or good continuous reporting on what's going on here?
Yeah, so there's a few things that we've put in place recently. We founded a group that has a monthly press release and we try to push more coverage. But the difference for me personally, for my company, is whenever I get the coverage, especially in the Philly region, I get corporations that come to me and ask me then about my business. And that's probably the most important thing for driving my story in my company. But my lessons learned, and this was a big lessons learned for me, and I think you articulated it incredibly well, is it's not about the technology, it's about the story. And so my first year, I would talk about my technology and my infrastructure and my cloud, but what they wanted to hear about was being a woman in tech with 4 children and why did I found my company. And that was a big learning curve for me, to learn how to talk about my story in that way. And then the tech, they're interested afterwards at another stage.
Yeah.
And so that was, I think you articulated that really well.
Thank you.
People think about what the story is. That's why people care. And I read your news feed, and for me it's really interesting and powerful because I don't have the capacity or the time to keep up with what happens in the city and all the other companies, but I know all these CEOs. I'm in a Ben Franklin CEO group, an I2N CEO group, and so for me, the power that you give me is to summarize everything in a 10-minute read, rather than trying to work out all these things for myself. And so that's why I love what you do. It's a little bit of a different perspective, but that's why it's important for me. But the press itself, we have to work out a way to give more suburb companies more press. And unless you're in the city and really networking with people, it's harder to get. It just is. And my lessons learned was the best way to get the press is to know the people themselves. If you're not there, and you're not in the meetings, and you're not in the groups in the city, it's very challenging. Or I found it challenging anyway.
All right, who's next? Who had their hand up? Let's introduce ourselves.
I'm Mike Gutman of Walnut Street Labs. My question is, you said that the most interesting thing that you do is to know people. Could you tell us a story about the most interesting person you've met?
It's a very good question. I meet a lot of really interesting people. I think, let's see, one person that comes to mind that I actually even haven't written a story about yet, because I'm still trying to figure out the best way to do it, is a member at NextFab. So NextFab is it's down in sort of in South Philly, Graduate Hospital area, and they're a big maker space, so they have like 3D printers and stuff. They're sort of like a Walnut Tree Labs, but for hardware. And I met a member there who, he's a hacker. He said, I'm a hacker by trade. And I said, yeah, okay, because like everyone, everyone I meet is like a hacker by trade. But people pay him to break into their, I guess like their firewalls and stuff. Like he tries to penetrate their system to see how where the vulnerabilities are. So he does that, and that's cool. But then he's also like the head of the, now I'm gonna mess up the name, but it's something like the International Lockpickers Association of America, and he's like the Philly chapter president. And he's just like, he's really into locks, and he was telling me, yeah, the state of locks in America today is terrible. And I was just like, oh, okay, and I'm just like writing all this down. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out the best way to cover him. I think I wanna do like a video of him like picking a lock or something and like talking about locks. And so that's kind of why I love my job, that I can meet someone like that who I would probably never meet. I don't know where I would meet this guy. But I could meet him and talk to him, and he would just like tell me all about what he does. And yeah, I think what I love about my job is that it makes, I am just like interested in, I feel like I'm like automatically just interested in people, but it sort of gives me this excuse, like, it's not weird that I'm just like interested in talking to everyone. I can be like, well, this is just for my job, so like, tell me about what you do. Is that interesting enough? I'll see if I can think of another one, but yeah, I meet a lot of interesting people.
Okay.
We have a question from our Twitter account. Can you talk a little bit about the readership demographics for Technically? Who reads it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I should know this more, but I don't know it too much, because so we have our business side and then we have our editorial side, and while we are better than a traditional newspaper where our business and editorial side actually talk and like see each other and like know what's going on, I can't say that I have like the definite mind of like what the demographics are, though I guess I have, even though I can't give you the specs on like 40% male, women, I have this idea of like who the technically affiliated reader is in my mind based on like all the people that I've met at tech events. And so I will say that like I feel like we have a mix of people who are really deep into so software developers who are coding and they're really sort of in the weeds, but then there's also the people on the fringes who say, I don't know, they might run a public computer lab, or they might teach at a public school teaching like tech to students. So it's like a mix, and I think that's always like what makes it interesting when I'm writing, is that I can't assume that everyone knows like what something is. So we have a lot of readers who work at Indie Hall, which is a co-working space in Old City, but a lot of people have no idea what Indie Hall is too. So it's that constant like making sure I explain everything, and we never want to be too like inside baseball. It's something that my editor pushes me on a lot.
What about reach? Do you have general numbers?
Yeah, okay, so I'm probably going to mess this up, and if I mess it up, I will email you so you can tell everyone the right.
Trillion.
No.
Not that many humans.
You know, it's modest. I think in Philly we're at 100,000 a month, but it's modest compared to other news organizations, and we're okay with that. I think we feel like we have. My editors talked about it a lot. You know, like reach is great because you're just reaching more people and you can sell ads, but we're really like. We want to stress having this sort of smaller engaged audience. So maybe we don't have like 1 million views a month, but the people that read us will go to our events and will like pay attention to what we're doing and sort of talk about it. And that almost seems more important than just being able to sell ads for like a huge amount of readers. Yeah.
Jeannie, you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Jeannie McGinn. I'm the branch manager at Fulton Bay.
And?
Proud to be the banker of all this.
Well, you're part of the community, the chamber, or?
Chamber, yeah, probably board for the Chamber of Commerce also. Question, can you share a success success story that from your coverage, company really took off?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me think. So you mean that because of my coverage, the company took off?
You got, extra visibility, phones started ringing, they really saw some benefit.
Yeah,
Besides Walnut Street Labs, of course.
one that comes to mind, which is actually interesting because I haven't yet written about their company either, but I met, so what I do, and I'm sorry, I was going to do this today here, but my brother took me here to Westchester, and we've got to go back to the city, but I was going to stay for the whole day and like hang out, and what I usually do is maybe every month or so I'll work out of a co-working space in the city to meet the members. And so I was at Drexel's co-working space, their business incubator, the Biata Institute, and I met Drexel. Now she was, I don't know if she's a junior or going to be a senior, but she's running this company called Purple Cloud Technologies, and they do like mobile app stuff for hotels. So it's like a way to organize, like where are all the brooms and like has this room being cleaned, and because apparently hotels are like really backwards and that kind of thing. And I invited her to pitch at Switch Philly, which is this demo competition that we have during Philly Tech Week every year. And the winner gets this big prize package of I don't know how my boss finagled this, but we got them a meeting with First Round Capital and then like Free Space Adventure Forth and like a bunch of stuff. She met, I don't know if she met with Josh Koppelman, but she met with one of the partners at First Round after she won the competition, and she got sort of all this like exposure, and she didn't tell me this, but she told my editor, and he told me, and she told him like, this is going to be the reason my company succeeds, and sort of just hearing something like that was kind of amazing to think that like we could have an impact like that. But I'm looking forward to finally writing her story. She has a pilot with a hotel in the city, but they're not ready yet to like go public, so that's why I haven't written about it yet.
Clay, did you end up here by seeing that article in Technically Philly? I feel like we ended up with a couple of
people come
people.
in like every other week that still say that they found us through that original article.
Oh, that's great.
Was that you? I don't know.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So I had a question for you.
Go ahead.
I'm Mary Fisher, I'm Chris's partner in 23 More Digital. What's the university tech scene looking like? Is there a hotbed? Is Drexel kind of the place for tech? Or what have you found for the up and coming talent in Philly?
Yeah, since I've started 2 years ago, it seems like things have really taken off in the university tech scene. And I think when I started out, I was hearing more from Penn, but now Drexel has really taken off in the last 2 years. I mean, yeah, you guys know all about, I guess, John Fry's, he has this whole image of, this vision of the innovation neighborhood, which is going to turn sort of like right around Drexel, so 33rd and Market, into like this tech hub, and they're like erecting buildings, and it's quite like a lofty vision. But yeah, so First Round Capital started their dorm room fund, which was a student-run investment firm, and that happened just about a year ago. I think that sort of really pushed things. Then First Round Capital came to Penn's campus, and so we work out of there, and there's just always like constant student startups just like working out of there. And I think, yeah, we've seen a lot more also of like schools realizing that their students are becoming entrepreneurs and sort of taking pride in that and promoting it. So Drexel now sends me press releases about student startups, and that never used to happen. Or like student-built video games and things like that. And that used to be stuff that like, I don't know, they would have to come find me to like pitch it if they wanted to do that.
And has that led down into the high school level at all? Because I'm specifically interested, I know there's girls IT.
Girl Develop It? Or
Yeah, Girl Develop It, yeah. I know that's one thing that's got going, but I'm really interested in what's there, especially for girls in STEM.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, on the high school note, I have seen like sort of, it's like the tech thing is growing at high schools So there's a group now, it's just like 2 months old, and it's called High School Hackers, and they're all just in high school around the area, and they meet up once a month, and they like work on projects, and they like eat Chipotle, and then they like, just talk and like to meet each other, and it's super impressive. And it started by a guy who's 15 years old, and I was like, what was I doing when I was 15? Like, not that. And so when it comes to young women in STEM, Tech Girls is the most prominent organization in Philly that focuses on young women in tech. So they focus on middle schoolers, and they do like a summer entrepreneur boot camp. It's a little bit like a mini Dream Adventures for like young girls. I was a mentor last year, and it was really cute. They all had their slides, and they were like pitching to like a group of people like this about like their revenue model, and they're like 12. And I was like, that's awesome. So yeah.
I need to ask about, hold on, Lynn, you're next. Are PRs worth it? You said people still send them. You read them. I'm happy to hear that. So if we have a PR, how should we write it, and will you open it? Or do you just want an email? Because sometimes I think that's the old school. Who writes PRs anymore? But.
Yeah, it's a good question. I will read it. I will read it if you make it clear that it's like Philly related, because I do get a lot of junk. And I guess maybe one of the worst things I am at my job is I'm really bad at email, and I think Ben and Chris know that, and it's embarrassing. I just get all this email, and like I'm never at inbox zero. But yeah, I guess something, I think you guys have done this before. I think this is what works the best, is like you stick the press release to the bottom, but then up top you'll give a little like quick intro, like of like what's most important, and then if I want more detail I can get it. So yeah, sort of top level stuff at the top to get my attention, and then stick the press release at the bottom. Because, even though press releases are boring, there usually is stuff in there that's important. So I guess there's a reason they exist.
If you put something in the title, like Philadelphia, you would click on a specific
Yeah.
in the title.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the subject line is the most important. And this is very specific. Well, I think this goes for all journalists actually, but the Philadelphia thing is specific to me. But if you know like what a reporter likes to cover, or what they cover a lot, and it's like wearable tech or whatever, then you stick that in the subject line, and they'll open it because they're like automatically this is relevant. So yeah, if I see Philly in the subject line, like I'll know that that's something I'm going to be opening and responding to.
But you're not subscribing to a wire service and reading
No.
PRs coming that way. So
No,
to spend
no.
money on going to the PR newswire is wasted money. That's what I kind of think. Can you confirm that?
Yeah.
Off the record?
Actually, this is totally embarrassing. I did not know you could subscribe to a wire service to get press releases.
All right, Lynn, would you like to introduce?
Hi, my name is Lynn Walkman. It seems like your interest in people is really fundamental to the compelling nature of what you write. Yeah, I almost feel as though I'm reading Dickens in Philadelphia in the 21st century, but I did want to ask you, what makes for a good interview? And it seems sometimes that people can be a bit myopic if they're so focused on work and their particular niche. And so what do you advise in terms of outlook and philosophy in a sense, and branching out to really for people and companies to embrace that nature and the story side of interview?
So you're saying advice for if you were going to be an interview subject?
Yes, what makes a compelling interview?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's try to get out of the mindset that you're talking to a reporter. I know that might sound scary, because then later you're like, oh man, what did I say? And like, what's going to be in there? But I feel like when people are very like, I'm talking to a reporter, they're kind of rigid and like stiff, and they don't feel comfortable just like, it's cool to, if I'm interviewing someone, I don't want them to go off on like tons of tangents, but like it's okay to like talk about something else, like like something else that's relevant that they're interested in, or something that's like happening in their life, because then you can get a look into I can get a look into like what else there is, and it's not just work. And sort of like what Joanne was saying, like I'm interested in like this, it's not just the technology. So I think reporters always want to hear I guess I can't generalize, but myself, like I always want to hear like what's behind the business. So it's like I don't want to just hear like what the software does, but like I'm interested in like, oh, were you inspired because like of something that happened to you when you were younger, or were you?
You're interested in the journey, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And what's interesting about that is when people come to, I just had a conversation this morning with somebody, when people come to do this, to speak here, they ask, what should I talk about? And their first instinct is just to talk about their product. But we say, your product is great, but really people are interested in the journey, and that's the real story.
Yeah.
And that's to get back to the community, because you have a lot of people saying, is it worth doing this? Why haven't I succeeded in 4 months? It's good to have somebody say, well, actually it takes 7 years. Rick Nucci was like, 7 years. And the great anecdote from his presentation was that people would say, oh, hey Rick, how you doing? You still working on that Boomi thing? And he would say, yeah. And then what happened, right? So that kind of reality check from the stories is always kind of the most compelling thing, I think, from the speakers here.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Just one thing. I think just this idea of like vulnerability and sort of taking that guard down of being like, I want to look like the best, smartest entrepreneur out there. I think just sort of letting yourself like be human and be like, yeah, something like, oh, I've been working on this for a long time and like we didn't have a customer. Like that's interesting to me if you're like you keep going. So things like that. Oh, sorry. I said go with Joanne first then.
Was there a question behind me?
David?
Yes, David Chocko, I work for a small investment banking firm.
Hi.
Question, what type of personality do you see getting funded? I mean, I look at it from a product standpoint, and what somebody, first thing we look at is instantly, we look at the financials, and then we look at whether the person succeeded, etc. But you're looking at it from a personality standpoint. Do you see a common type of personality that the money funds are gravitating towards?
So that's an interesting question because here in Philly, which is basically really what I focus on, venture funding isn't a huge thing. So in the tech scene, it's more about bootstrapping, not going straight to like a VC. But yeah, I guess I'll say it, and I guess you all know this, that the type of people I see getting funded by venture capitalists are the sort of like arrogant, brash, like we think we're the best. But I mean, it's not as bad as it is, I think, that it is in like Silicon Valley or something, where like, though there is that level of like over like self-confidence, people are a little more human here because they're down to earth, because they're in Philly. They're like, if you choose to be in Philly, you're not like, you understand sort of like your place, if that makes sense.
You're humble, or?
Yeah, I think you're more humble than like whatever rat race is going on in like Silicon Valley or like even New York City. The type of people, yeah, it is, but yeah, it's a hard question to answer because out of my coverage, maybe like I want to say like 5 companies I know got venture funding. Like it's just not really as big of a thing here. Yeah.
Thank you.
Steve?
Hi, Steve Paul, founder of Bulata. So when you talk to entrepreneurs in the Philly area, do you see any points of pain that are reoccurring that are specific to the Philly area? Or do you notice things that were points of pain that kind of flipped and are no longer, or actually advantageous to the client?
Yeah, I guess when I started, I heard a lot of people saying that you couldn't raise. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse because you guys have probably heard this too, but a lot of people would say the reason we can't raise money is because we're here in Philly. And that's why we can't get investment. And I think that has really changed in the last year or two, where now people are saying we can raise money. Like there's some like companies like RJ Metrics and like Curelate who have raised money, and they're saying like we raise money and we could be anywhere and it doesn't matter. And it just matters that the company is good and the team is good, the product is good. And I think that people are noticing that, and they're realizing now that like location like isn't really an excuse, or not just an excuse, but like they don't let it discourage them. think they see companies, like Monetate, the companies that have raised a bunch of money from investors from the West Coast, from investors from Boston, from New York, and it's not like, it's no longer a barrier. Yeah.
That's good to hear.
Kyle Hudson from Digital Exhibition Systems. Do you think there's any advantages to being in Philadelphia?
Yeah, definitely.
Greater Philadelphia.
Greater Philadelphia. Voices residents.
Yeah, I mean, I think being in Philadelphia is an advantage, but that's why I'm here. So what entrepreneurs always talk to me about is like the quality of life, so like livability, which like is harder to get somewhere in New York City where things are like really expensive, or in like Silicon Valley where you have to drive everywhere. So here, or I don't know how much it applies, but I think it does apply to the suburbs too, is like everything is close, so you can meet people really easily, and like you can meet people really easily, like everyone's close by. You can just like bump into people at a coffee shop and you'll start talking about something and it will lead to something else. So that there's that quality of life and that affordability, which is great for like, especially if you're trying to like raise a family, like older entrepreneurs. And then the universities, which like have tons of talents, like people are always, like a lot of companies have moved in from the suburbs, and they always say that it's like for recruiting, that they want to be closer to the talent. So those two main things, I think. But yeah, I think it has way more advantages than disadvantages.
Well, you heard the story of Rocky, right? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, John Fisher with for 81 Photonics. So we build aerial reconnaissance cameras for drones. In this month's Success magazine, Indie Labs got picked up. How do what are the attributes of a piece that gets picked up nationally or internationally? We get a lot of global customers, and trying to. We find that actually our product page gets slower hits than our Ballard team page, which is interesting. But what's the national, international aspect of getting a piece picked up?
Yeah, so I guess it's, I've said this like a million times now, but it's something like if you can find a really interesting story about a person, I think that's something that people like pick up on. So just something I wrote about for today is like there's this website called the Rap Test, and they're like they play rap music and you identify like what song it is, and it's super buzzy right now. It got picked up by like TechCrunch and Business Insider and all these music online sites, news sites. And the reason they picked it up is because it was started by this 21-year-old kid who says he just loves rap. So, you know, he's like, I don't care about the money. I mean, I don't know if he doesn't care about the money, but he says he doesn't care about the money and that he just loves rap and just wanted to make this product that he loved. And so I think something like that, where people can like relate, it's like a relatable thing. So it's like, yeah, it's like you can understand what it feels like to like just love something, want to make something. And then the shock factor of like, oh, he's 21, he's just a kid. So I guess maybe it's a mixture of like relatability, but then like shock factor. Yeah.
That's true globally as well. I mean, have you gotten any pieces picked up globally by?
Globally.
Like India, you know, magazines or, you know.
I'm not sure that we have. I'm not sure about global. Stuff has been picked up nationally. I mean, the biggest story for us wasn't even one story sort of that like we created. It was the Tetris on the Sears Center. That was like the story that got picked up the most for us. So we played for Philly Tech Week. We worked with the Drexel to play Tetris on the side of a skyscraper, and so there was that like shock factor of like, okay, this is like huge, this world record, but then it was also like a playfulness because it was like just fun. Yeah, but so I don't know if we've gotten picked up globally, but yeah.
I'd like to. It's getting time check 10:08, so we'll wrap up in a couple of minutes, and then usually people linger and hang out, and you can ask Juliane some questions during that part. But I'd like to know what is on the roadmap for Technically Philly? Doubling reporters, doubling coverage, what kind of interesting things are you guys
Expanding in Westchester.
Well, technically, Delaware just launched last night, right?
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
Ben, exactly. My editor and one of our co-founders went down to Delaware for our Delaware launch. It was really cool. Governor Markell was there. So yeah, we had a team retreat last week, and we talked about this. And one of our co-founders, Chris Wink, was asking, should we expand? Well, I guess for some context, we're also in Brooklyn and Baltimore. So we have technically Brooklyn, technically Baltimore, and now technically Delaware. And so he was asking, should we expand only on the Northeast Corridor? Should we focus on the Northeast Corridor, or should we expand elsewhere to, I don't know, like just Detroit, or like the Research Triangle, or like Providence, which is still Northeast Corridor, but like further away. And so have a model more like a curbed, where you're just in like tons of different cities. And we all sort of agreed that we wanted to focus on the Northeast Corridor and focus on slow growth and making sure that we were really like killing it in like every city and doing our job well in every city before we tried to move on. So instead of just like having our hands in like tons of different cities and not doing as high caliber of a job, we wanted to be in like 5 markets and do it like really, really well. So yeah, we're gonna be in DC in a month, and then Boston is the next one. I think that will be by the end of the year. And in terms of like hiring, we're still like one lead reporter in every city, who's like the person who has the boots on the ground, making all the connections, and then yeah, we have our biz dev team, which does events nationally and like does sales. So
Who's your typical advertiser?
yeah, that's a good question. There's like it runs the gamut. There's like banks, law firms, sometimes startups who are hiring, and they like to, if they want more than our jobs board, they'll like put an ad up. And then we also do like native advertising. We're trying to move more into this, where we do some sort of sponsored content, where either where like sort of they give us like something they want us to write about, and we do it, but they don't have any editorial oversight. So we're trying to move into that. We did that with Silicon Valley Bank last year. Yeah.
Okay, one more question.
I have 2 little questions, if that's okay. So the first one is, I'm in a group in New York, one in Silicon Valley, and they talk a lot about failure and which companies failed and why they failed. I don't see that as much in Philadelphia, and especially the companies that fail talk about the emotional side and all the different steps that they went through. Like, do you think there's a reason that they don't, like, do you think it's seen not as a good thing? Yeah. Like, I can never understand it. It's very prominent in those 2 regions, but not here.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard that there was such a distinction between us versus like sort of like New York and Silicon Valley. But yeah, we try to cover failure as much as we can. But it's true. It's really like sore subject, as much as the culture is like fail fast and like talk about it. I think there's a buffer of like people want like 6 months to sort of be like, yeah. So sometimes I just have to wait. But it's hard. It's like, as much as people say that failure is necessary, I think they need to see other like people that they admire fail too before they can come up and say like, oh, I failed too. I don't know. I think there's still a high amount of pride, and I think it fits into the entrepreneur type, right? If it's like very confident, it's like feeling like you're going to change the world.
I've definitely seen a trend on those two regions. And then my other question is a small one. Is that I raised all my money here, but it was hard to do, and they need to see a lot of traction before they fund in this region. And I think you can't change the risk tolerance for the investors in this region. You have to change what you can give to the entrepreneurs to give them the traction that they need. Do you have any ideas or input on how entrepreneurs can meet the bigger companies, the heads of innovation, the CTOs in this region? Like, do you have any plans in Technically Philly to work on ways to get their attention or to have them involved in your press processes?
That's a good question. I don't know of any plans that we have to do that, but I'll definitely raise that at our next team meeting.
We've talked about that a lot in our small groups.
Yeah, because we always say that we want to act as like a connector, and sometimes it's not enough just to, I guess, write about something and have someone read about it and then reach out cold. And I guess there's not always, the heads of innovation probably won't be just hanging out at like a mixer or like a tech meetup.
Right, it's hard to get in front of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd love to brainstorm if you have ideas on that. We've talked about speed dating events where you date the CIOs, and that might be an interesting press topic as well because it's not done very often. I think it would give the startup companies in this community a lot of traction. And what, you could sell to a CMO or a CIO, you can raise venture capital. And often that one's easier.
And office hours, we
Office hours, yeah.
Here, we run a couple of sessions.
Good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
I forgot to say this, but I want to give special thanks to Monica Zimmerman. Did she leave?
She left.
Oh, so Monica runs or ran the Control Center for Entrepreneurship at Westchester University.
Oh, okay.
And she was supportive of us from the beginning when we were nothing but an idea. And she's turning over the management of that organization to a new person. This was her last Pride Startup Meetup. She's now the assistant dean of the business school. But that probably offers us better ties into the university. And Terry in the back corner is from Fox Rothschild. Michael Harrington, we met at the I2N board meeting and he wanted to support us. So Terry's been here a lot, working pro bono, helping us do a lot. Offering advice to a lot of people on a lot of different subjects. So kudos to those guys for making this happen. CCEDC with their grant and a ton of support in connections. I want to give them a shout out. My business, Piece of Pizza, gives us a lot of free food. Am I missing anybody on the thank you list? Well, thanks to a lot of the community regulars too. Jeannie, and Dave, and everybody. CCBC Marianne's from here. Sean there on TV. And so if we had more time, I'd kind of force every entrepreneur, a startup leader to stand up and do one sentence. But I don't think we have time. But let's not, maybe get in a line, and everyone should get a chance to pitch Juliana like one sentence, an intro. Because she has a 10:30 meeting with us downstairs with Ben Franklin. 2 folks are coming from Ben Franklin Technology to hear an update on the lab. And we may invite some startups down there to also talk about hopefully what's unique about Walnut Street Labs. And so it is 10:16. Let's break and hang out and chat with Juliane. So thanks a lot.
Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.